In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
My family excluded me from my sister's wedding, and they made fun of me, but when they lost all their money and begged me for help, I sent them a list of cheap old people's homes. My whole existence had been focused on my studies, on sacrificing myself, and staying quietly in the background, while my older sister enjoyed the unconditional affection of our parents. They adored her and considered her their greatest pride, while I was simply an afterthought, someone who had to strive to secure their financial future. It wasn't the role I would have chosen, but I accepted it because it seemed to be the only option available. One day, after spending endless hours immersed in books and notes, I felt completely exhausted. I had been locked in my small room studying all day and needed to rest. I resorted to my favorite, though perhaps not the most productive, method of distraction and started browsing my social networks on my phone. That's when I saw her. There was my sister, wearing an elegant dress, surrounded by people celebrating her engagement. The image description revealed something that left me frozen. We can't wait to celebrate our wedding in Hawaii with all our loved ones. Apparently, all her loved ones didn't include me. My parents appeared proudly next to her, elegantly dressed, smiling as if they had won the lottery. There were relatives I hadn't seen in years, all smiling and toasting with champagne. Everyone was there except me. They didn't even consider informing me. My sister always treated me like a stranger, but I didn't expect her to even bother sending me a simple message to tell me. My parents, the same ones who constantly repeated the importance of family to me, didn't consider me part of it and didn't even notify me of the event. To give you an idea of how my parents have treated me, I have spent summers working 2 part-time jobs to avoid causing them financial worries, giving up nights out with friends to study. I had to make them proud, put up with their lectures about how my future success would be the family retirement plan. My whole life has been organized around my efforts to provide them with a better future. My first impulse was to call them and demand an explanation. I needed to hear them tell me why I wasn't important enough to be part of the celebration. I dialed their numbers, but only got their voicemail. I tried again with the same result. They didn't even bother to answer. I saw no point in calling my sister. What good would it do? She would either ignore me or, even worse, give me a half-baked excuse that would only increase my pain. I had to accept the harsh truth that I had always avoided because it was painful. To them, I was expendable. 2 days later, I received the first notification from my parents, a message reminding me, "Don't forget to study hard." My finger hovered over the mute button for a moment before pressing it. I don't understand why I hesitated, but I finally silenced their numbers. Then I did the same with my sisters. I have worked hard all my life for the family, but I am only part of it when they need me, and I cease to be so when they don't. If they didn't need me in their lives, maybe it was time for me to stop needing them in mine. Update 1. Several weeks have passed, but I wanted to have something meaningful to report and not just small details. To begin with, my inbox was flooded with messages from my father. I usually only saw them hours later, as I didn't receive notifications because they were set to silent. At first, their tone was calm, almost friendly, as if nothing had happened. They wanted to know why I hadn't returned their calls, why I was so quiet. My mother mentioned how worried she was, hoping that I wasn't stressed about exams, but her apparent concern soon gave way to passive-aggressive comments. She started insinuating that I was being ungrateful. She mentioned things like the special meals they had prepared for my birthdays, which was nothing extraordinary, and how they had helped me with college. This wasn't entirely true either, because as I mentioned before, I worked to pay my tuition. My father also sent some messages, not as many as my mother, but along the same lines of, "We did this for you and you can't return the favor." This guilt trip was nothing new, but hearing it all now, when I was already upset about what I had discovered, was unbearable. Then came more unpleasant messages, calling me spoiled and saying that my only concern should be to study and respond to my parents. That if I was wasting my time at parties, they would be very angry with me. I deleted each message without reading them completely. I have endured this kind of treatment for years. My parents cannot expect me to be treated like a punching bag and to remain their obedient child forever. Recently, a cousin got in touch with me. We were close, but not the kind of cousins who talk all the time. That's why I didn't expect to hear from her, although I knew she had attended the engagement party. I had seen her in the photos my sister uploaded. She asked me why I hadn't attended the party. I told her I hadn't even been invited. According to my parents, I hadn't attended because I needed to concentrate on my studies to get a well-paid job and eventually repay the family for their efforts. My parents had made it sound as if I had chosen it, but my cousin called to confirm it. I feel like they only have me so they can get something out of me. They expect me to give them a lot while treating me like a simple object. What had I done to deserve that treatment? I didn't skip parties or refuse to study for hours just to make them proud. But my cousin didn't end there. She said she had heard from her parents that the wedding in Hawaii was not only a waste, but an imminent financial catastrophe. My parents had exhausted all their retirement savings and taken out a second mortgage to finance it. At the engagement party, my father had even joked with the guests about how, by staying on at school, I was helping them save money. There was some truth in that. Not inviting me would help them save money if they spent so much, plus I would stay studying to ensure their financial future. That night, sitting in my room, I drafted a message for my parents. I wrote to them, just as they had done, mentioning all the times I sacrificed something to stay studying at their insistence. It's not that I consider studying a bad thing, but my life has revolved exclusively around that with no room for anything else. I spent summers working and studying to get good grades. I didn't go to birthdays, outings with friends, and all the typical activities of young people, all to have a good profession, as my parents called it. And all for nothing, because you see how my parents reward me for my effort. An effort that they never demanded of my sister. I didn't write it so they would realize and apologize to me, because I know they never will. They don't see me as their daughter, they see me as their golden ticket to financial salvation. But I did write this to let off some steam and explain the current situation to them. When I pressed send, I expected to receive a reply fairly quickly, perhaps within a few hours. But there was silence for several days. Then, one morning, a message from them appeared in my inbox. The message was as cold and contemptuous as I feared. They accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, of acting like a capricious child for not attending a wedding when I should have been studying. My father wrote that I should stop feeling sorry for myself and concentrate more on my studies. My mother added a final reprimand, reminding me that family obligations entail sacrifices, something she said I was not making. I haven't replied to that message because it's practically the same as always. They didn't even care to understand why I was angry. All they care about is that I finish my studies, get a good job, and send them money to spend on them and my sister. If there is anything I can thank them for, it is having taught me discipline and the value of hard work, because now I can meet their expectations. But no one says I have to send them money when I make it. Maybe they believe it, but it's time to stop listening to them. Update 2. How have you been? I'm still dealing with my parents and my sister. I don't know if I can call them family at this point, because they have been anything but that to me. But here's my update on them. One night, I opened my computer again and replied to their email. I had been holding back all my anger, and I needed to express it in a reply. I didn't want them to have the last word. I told them unambiguously that I didn't owe them any favors. Unlike my sister, I hadn't depended on their financial support for years. I mentioned the lack of invitation and the jokes about saving money by not attending, which was a lie because it hadn't been my decision as they made it seem. In the end, I ended the relationship with a clean break. I told them that, being over 18 and able to live independently, I saw no reason to continue with this farce of a relationship. Evidently, they valued my sister more than me, so they could rely on her and her new husband for whatever came next. If they needed money for their retirement, that marriage had better be very prosperous, because they had invested a lot in it and now it had to bear fruit, or they would face serious problems. After sending it, her reply arrived the next day, but I couldn't read it. I deleted it without opening it, knowing that it would contain the same old thing, blame shifting and psychological manipulation. But she hadn't finished. That same afternoon, while using my phone, I saw that I had a silent call from my mother. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the reject button, but decided to answer. The conversation didn't differ much from what she had said to me before. The difference was that now she insisted that the wedding wasn't about me, so I had no right to feel excluded. Besides, the wedding was my sister's, and she chose who attended and who didn't. I asked her how she would feel if the roles were reversed, if my sister invited only me and I didn't even mention the event to them. Even worse, if I made fun of them at the wedding. And not to mention commenting on how much money was saved because my father eats a lot, or because my mother likes to overdo it with the drinks. She tried to defend herself by saying that my father had been watching his diet lately and that she only drank in moderation. But if 10 glasses of wine at a birthday party, the last time we had an event where we were all invited, is moderation, I don't want to imagine when she didn't. I told her that if she wanted to continue showing favoritism, it was her right because it was her life, but mine belonged to me and I could live it without them. I hung up because I didn't want to keep hearing how ungrateful I was from their perspective. Not even 5 minutes had passed when I received a call from my father. His tone was harsher and more confrontational. He was angry about everything, but especially because my mother had told him that I called him a glutton and her a drunkard. Although on second thought, I think he was more offended by my description of him. I matched his tone and told him that respect was earned, not demanded. I had already earned a place in their hearts, but they hadn't even earned a visit from me when they finally got old and couldn't take care of themselves. He said I wouldn't dare do that to them, because the family had always preached the values of looking after each other, and abandoning old people for a stupid wedding was very low of me. I replied that I had finished trying to win their approval, and that they could save their lectures for someone who really cared. Then I hung up. Since neither of them had managed to convince me to remain docile, they had to involve my sister in the situation. At this point, I care little for my sister because, as I said, we have never had a close relationship. I would expect her to invite me to the wedding if only because we are sisters, but my main problem is with my parents, who mocked me and used me as their ticket to financial salvation. Anyway, she called me later that night. She used the falsest tone of concern she could find. She said she didn't understand why I was so upset and that she had assumed I wouldn't care about the wedding since I was so busy with my studies. I told her that her assumption was just another example of how little she and the rest of the family valued or knew me. I told her that she was a spoiled child who had never worked for anything in her life. I told her that she owed our parents everything they had given her, including the engagement party and the wedding, and that she'd better get ready for when they needed her in their old age. For her, that was my responsibility. That's why my parents had pressured me so much to study. Of course, they had given me so many lectures, punishments when I brought home a bad grade and a childhood with nothing but hard work. Whereas she, on the other hand, only received money, a normal childhood or even quite a spoiled one, and even a dream wedding. She also accused me of being jealous and of trying to ruin her happiness. I laughed as she spoke, telling her that she didn't need to ruin anything. She and our parents were doing perfectly well on their own and I didn't need to intervene. I didn't plan to confront my sister about all this, but she has become involved in this dispute, and it doesn't bother me to direct some of my anger towards her. Update 3. I have a lot to tell you after these months without any news from me. To begin with, the wedding has already taken place, and with it some problems have also arisen. I started an internship at a company that I consider very good, an opportunity that my teachers helped me to get. The work was not easy, but I was making progress. They had even shown interest in offering me a permanent position, which seemed like a big step forward to me. It wasn't the dream opportunity one had had as a child, but I had achieved it on my own merits, and that made all the difference. During this time, I kept my distance from my parents and my sister. I knew they would continue trying to drag me back into their world of expectations, manipulation, and guilt. Then, one afternoon, I ran into an old family friend in a cafe. I'll call her A for future reference. She is one of my mother's closest friends. She recognized me immediately and asked how I was. We started with small talk, and she asked me about university and my family. I gave her generic answers and mentioned that my relationship with my parents was not the best. But when she asked me specifically about them, I knew something was wrong. He leaned towards me, as if wanting to maintain confidentiality, and told me that things were not going well for them. My father had lost his job. He didn't know the exact details, but it seemed that he was having trouble finding something that paid enough to cover his expenses. He mentioned that my mother was working tirelessly, but it wasn't enough. The situation was serious. Her voice dropped as she told me how my parents' debts were piling up. Yes, she also mentioned the wedding in Hawaii. I tried to keep my composure, asking about my mother's health, pretending not to know how bad things were. But A was too immersed in the gossip to notice. She said she hoped my parents could work it out, but it was hard to imagine how they would do it with so much debt. A few days later, I received a message from my mother from a new number saying they needed to talk. She explained that my father was having trouble finding work and that they needed my help. They must have found out about my internship because they were looking for money. I didn't reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something sarcastic or angry, but I held back. Instead, I simply deleted the message. I had nothing to say to them. Days later, I ran into a cousin I hadn't spoken to recently. He casually mentioned the situation at home. I know, I have a family of gossips who love to divulge personal information. He confirmed what I already suspected. My sister's life was not as perfect as it appeared. Her marriage was not going well due to the pressure of my parents' debts. Apparently, her new husband's family was upset about the amount of money spent on the wedding, as they had also contributed financially. They were not happy with anything, not with the marriage, not with my sister, not with my parents. That is basically what has been happening in my parents and my life. Update 4. I was catching up on work one afternoon when my phone vibrated, showing an unknown number. It was my mother again. She didn't have her usual authoritative tone, but sounded desperate and sad. She explained how their financial situation had spiraled out of control and how the wedding had been a terrible mistake. With my father losing his job, things had become complicated because they hadn't expected any of this to happen at this point. She said she hoped that I had finally calmed down. My father then picked up the phone. He started by blaming his bad luck, saying that things had gotten out of hand. He said that he had been working tirelessly to fix it, but nothing seemed to be working. They didn't know who else to turn to, and I was their only hope. To be clear, they never apologized to me. But there they were, asking for more money. Regardless of the fact that I don't want to do anything for them at the moment, I am working on an internship. It's a miracle that they are paying me. And although it is a good company, it is extraordinary that they are giving me a salary for my work. Many of my colleagues have gotten unpaid internships, just getting experience. So I'm not in a position to help them financially. Besides, if they spend all those resources on a party that lasted a few hours, they should be asking my sister for help, not me. I didn't enjoy a single snack at the party. I don't understand why I should get involved in this. My sister called me later that night from her husband's phone. I assumed that another unknown number meant that it was one of them. She was crying. She said she didn't understand how things had gotten so bad, how her life had fallen apart after the wedding. She begged me to forgive her, to forget the past, just to help them get back on their feet. It wasn't just my parents who were in debt. It was her and her husband, too. Some of the expenses had been covered by them and their in-laws, and now they had no way of paying them back. My parents had promised to help them with those expenses, as they had used up all the credit on their cards. I told her that I wasn't interested in reconciling, especially if it meant a cost to me. These kinds of requests should be addressed to the family, I told her, and I was never considered as such. At least the family is invited to family events. But I wasn't invited, so I have no obligation to help them. She stammered, begging me not to be so insensitive. It wasn't insensitivity, I just had enough. I reminded her how easily they had erased me from their lives when everything was going well. I told her that this wasn't my problem and that it wasn't up to me to solve it. In the days that followed, I received messages, emails, calls, apologies mixed with guilt and requests disguised as pleas for help, everything imaginable. But I ignored them all. I am finding some satisfaction in this whole situation because they are receiving the consequences of their actions. And I am not doing anything. They have placed themselves in this difficult position. The last message I received from my mother was a simple line, "We are sorry. Please don't abandon us." I'm sorry too, but I must distance myself from them. My response to that message was a list of affordable nursing homes near their area. They're going to need them. Update 5. I've been asked what has happened to my parents and their debts, also about my sister's marriage and all the consequences of the wedding in Hawaii. I hope what I have to tell you is the end of my story. And for those of you who are worried about me and not about my parents and my sister, I can tell you that I have now got a permanent position in my company. Not only do I now have a decent salary, but also some benefits while I continue to gain experience. I don't know if I will stay here for many years, as I don't know what opportunities will arise in the future. But if I have the possibility of advancing in the company, I feel comfortable enough to stay for a long time. My father has found a job, but it has not been enough to prevent the sale of the house. They had a mortgage on it, which they took out to pay for part of the wedding. And as far as I know, they also have a lot of credit card debt. Curiously, I did not receive any more messages from them after my last reply with the list of old people's homes. It is ironic that I am now earning enough money to help them thanks to how much they insisted that I work hard, but that I do not do so because they only valued me for my usefulness and not as their daughter. If, over all these years, they had shown that they loved me as their daughter and not as an investment, today things would be different between us and for them. I probably would not have written any of this. I still occasionally meet up with relatives because I guess the city isn't that big, and they're the ones who keep me informed. Since my parents still have a lot of debts, despite having sold their house, until my father is not satisfied with either the salary or his new job. If my sister really doesn't improve her situation, they will really need the list of cheap residences. My joke will become reality. Now about my sister. They are not getting divorced, but they are living apart. It seems that the pressure from her in-laws has had an effect because they have managed to break up the marriage. The rumor is that the divorce is imminent, but neither of them has dared to file the legal documents. Can you imagine my sister getting divorced and getting married again in some exotic location? I would think that my parents have learned their lesson, but I'm not so sure. You know what? Now that my vacation is coming up and I'm receiving a real salary, and not a paltry amount, I've been considering a trip to Hawaii. Although I'm more inclined to save that money for a down payment on a house or an apartment, which is a more sensible decision. I think my vacation will be more modest, and I'll probably spend time resting after years dedicated only to studying and working. Addition, I've decided not to take the trip and to stay here. Maybe in 3 or 4 months I'll start looking for a place to buy according to my calculations.